Hi, my name is Gourmet. If you've never seen my face before, I've basically been a Preservation main ever since release. I've always played it in Frog instead of a Hall of Fame guild ever since that first tier inside of Dragonflight. So I've been playing it a while, and I'm again planning on playing it going into the next tier. So I got to test it this last week with heroic testing for Sprocketmonger, One Armed Bandit, and Mugsy. Although Mugsy wasn't much testing, but all of those VODs are also up on my YouTube channel if you want to go and check them out. This video I'm mostly just going to be talking about the strength of Preservation Evoker inside of the raid. I made another video talking about Mythic Plus if you want to go check that out, and I'll be doing another Mythic Plus video coming up for Preservation as well. But again, this one is mostly going to be going for the raid. Before we get started though, I am going to give you a refresher on the changes that are coming for Preservation Evoker in case you haven't kept up with all the blue posts that have been flooding in. So if you played Preservation Evoker last year, or you were unfortunate enough to have to heal next one, you know how dominant Flameshaper was last year. And once again, going into this year, Flameshaper is again going to be dominant compared to our Chrono Warden tree. Chrono Warden had little to no room to shine, and Blizzard is just ignoring Chrono Warden and only making it a lot worse by getting rid of our 4-set. So I foresee no reason for me to talk about Chrono Warden at all in this video. Instead, all of the changes they made for Evoker are mostly just focused on the Flameshaper tree. There's no actual changes to our regular talent tree, but there are some baseline changes to Evoker, though only a few. So starting off with the changes to our hero talent tree, the first change comes to where Enkindle was before. That is now on a choice node, and the talent that was below Enkindle has now been moved up to be on the choice node with Enkindle, which means that is going to be an easy take for us. This talent has also been buffed from 20% to 30%. Below that is now a talent that makes our Fire Breath and our Dream Breath tick 20% faster. In addition to that, Engulf is no longer going to extend the duration of our Dream Breath. However, now that's actually getting rid of some of the duration of our Dream Breath, now it's only 2 seconds instead of 4 seconds. It is now giving us some CDR on Dream Breath, which is interesting, and we're going to talk about later. We have some talents making Dream Breath a little bit stronger, making it tick faster and tick like 30% more. We can expect Consume the Flame, even though it's been changed from the 4-second consume to 2 seconds, it's still like the same relative number. So relative to a baseline Dream Breath, it is going to be doing somewhere around like 20 to 25% more than it was just on a baseline Dream Breath. However, it's important to remember that we are losing our tier set from last year, and our tier set was making Dream Breath do 40% more. So relative to that, it is now going to be doing, with the loss for a 4-set, even with the buffs to some of the Dream Breath healing and the Flameshaper tree, somewhere around 15% less. In addition to this, Engulf is now a hasted spell, and its baseline CD has been reduced, which means we might be able to get some extra cast in. And there have been some nice quality of life changes, the first being that Dream Breath is now going to hit 6 targets, and one of them is always you, which solves the problem of constantly having to point your Dream Breath away from the raid, which if you were like me, I absolutely hated doing this. And then the other change is that there's no more mastery snapshotting with things like Dream Breath that we have to worry about. So overall, it makes the quality of life of playing the tree a lot easier. Now, as for the actual gameplay, so if you've been paying attention, Dream Breath is now getting some CDR whenever we press Engulf, 6 seconds every single time. Engulf has a lower base CD, and it's now hasted. So all these give us some kind of incentive to stack a bit more haste than we were before, making a bit of a better stat for us. And it also opens up the opportunity to get extra Dream Breath and Engulf casts, like overall, but honestly, I'm just going to be talking about how many extra casts you can get between each stasis, because I feel like that's way more realistic than talking about like an overall number. So if you were to press like your Dream Breath and your Engulf kind of like on CD, not exactly on CD, but you're trying to get most uses out of both, if you're pressing them essentially on CD together, then you can get 1 extra Dream Breath and 1 extra Engulf between every single stasis cast. Now this makes the playstyle sound a lot better, like there's a lot more choice, like it's a lot more interactive. However, in practice, I didn't really find that. So let me explain. So if you are actually pressing them at the exact times they need to be pressed in order to get the CD back where you want it for your next stasis, you're probably going to be sending a lot of healing into the abyss because there's no healing to be done at that time. Like, the timings would have to work out so perfectly in order for it to work well. Otherwise, you are having to delay your stasis. Now, of course, there are going to be fights where delaying your stasis is the correct move, and so it just makes sense to play it that way and just play for like those extra casts at the correct times. But most of the time, in an ideal situation, you are pressing your stasis as soon as possible and when it comes up, and that's definitely like the biggest amount of HPS that you can get is using your stasis as many times compared to just getting 1 extra Dream Breath and 1 extra Engulf cast. So On paper, it sounds really good, but like in reality, if the timings of the fight don't really work out for it, I don't think most of the time that you are always going to be able to get and appreciate getting the extra Dream Breath and Engulf cast instead of just only getting the same amount you were before, but maybe making it more useful than it was. With that being said, I do think that the actual timings for like a regular Engulf kind of playstyle did feel really good on both Sprocketmonger and the One-Armed Bandit. Both of these fights had periodic heal absorbs that were going out that were really good with the timings of like just like Engulf and using stasis and getting like one, maybe two extra Engulf for stasis cast in between. Sprocketmonger especially, there were some times where I definitely did like sit on just like Engulf Dream Breath cast because like there just wasn't damage happening at the right times, and if I pressed it again, then it wasn't going to be back up for my stasis, and I wanted to have like a full-blown stasis for every single healing absorb that I could, because happening on like a pretty consistent interval where like every other heal absorb I could use a stasis and Engulf combo, which was really good, or even using it in the intermission was really good. I really like this fight. It was a really fun fight. I know this is a preservation video, but the raid is looking super, super fun, and the timings are looking good for playing something like an Engulf playstyle with stasis. For One-Armed Bandit, the timings were almost amazing as far as like every 30 seconds there was like a healing absorb going out, and so it felt like, you know, I'm setting up my stasis on one, I'm detonating on the next, I'm using EC on the next, I'm setting up my stasis on the next, I'm detonating my stasis on the next, I'm rewinding the next, and then I'm setting up again, I'm detonating again, and then I'm using Dream Flight here, and like all that kind of stuff. And there's like lots of like little damage in between to use your extra Dream Breath and Engulf casts as well. To the point where like on that fight, I could almost, not quite, but I could almost make use of like all my Dream Breaths and Engulfs, but there was definitely times where I was punching them. It kind of just depended because there's some RNG on the fight based on like what coins you put in. It's kind of like one of those fights where you can like pick your own battle and control like what mechanics he's going to do. The kind of downside to this though is that there were definitely times where with the spell queuing of the spells we chose, it would delay his heal absorb cast and my stasis would go off a few seconds before the heal absorb went off, which felt really bad. Now in an actual progression setting where you know the timings, this is less likely to happen. Probably just a PTR problem. However, it did feel kind of okay. It was also kind of hard to tell in that fight because on Sprocketmonger, we were doing like a pretty decent amount of healers, which is fine, but then on One-Armed Bandit, we were kind of overhealing. And so it was definitely a lot harder to feel how strong I was or wasn't. As far as Muggsy goes, we didn't ever see further than like a minute into the fight, and there was very little meaningful healing going on. And most other guilds didn't get to see that far into the fight, so I don't think using that as a proxy for anything is going to be fair. I also want to mention that I did put on a bit of extra haste for this, just to get an idea of kind of like how the haste skilling feels and goes, to see how easy it was to get the extra Dream Breath and Engulf cast in between since they're hasted now, and it did help a little bit. I definitely felt that like One-Armed Bandit where like the timings were a little bit tighter, though I definitely do not see us actually haste stacking. I think that's a little bit of cove, but I'm happy to be proven wrong. As far as talents go, I did something really similar to what we were doing before. However, since we're not playing like the forest that was Spark of Insight and stuff anymore, I went ahead and moved over some talents to get some more CDR. And then I also took Ouroboros just because like the extra healing from like Emerald Blossom every once in a while was okay. I also want to mention that I was almost never pressing Spirit Bloom. Spirit Bloom feels borderline stupid to press without our 4-set anymore. You barely press it before, and now it's just going to do 40% less. And also this build can cause you to go a bit more than we were before, so it's definitely something to look out for, especially if you're doing something like the haste stacking, you're getting more TAs and things like that, you're just casting more Dream Breath and Engulfs. It is of course going to eat your mana a lot faster than it was before. For our tier set, sorry I should have talked about this earlier, but our tier set is very lackluster. If you haven't kept up, all healers have the same 2 set. It is this Insurance 2 set. It has just like a regular proc per minute on this one. The difference though is how many procs you get from your 4 set. So our 4 set procs from our VE, which basically makes this like whenever you VE someone, and you can now VE someone basically every 12 seconds, you get an insurance and your friend gets an insurance. And what that basically means is that 50% of your insurance is always going yourself. So it kind of feels more like it's just a 4 set that says, hey, you get 3% leech or whatever number you want to call it, which is really lackluster compared to some of the other healers that basically just have like kind of like set modifiers on their healings, like buff to their healing or buffs to their spells and stuff like that, for us just to get a reduction on our VE, which the reduction on our VE does make sense with this new talent tree. However, it feels more like it should be something that's a talent and not a 4-set, since it goes hand in hand with all of our new talents. That one's a mystery to me. It does feel really lackluster though compared to all of the other healers, especially since most all of our insurances are just going on ourselves. Now, of course, because of how our mastery works, this is kind of still good. And if you're life binding someone, the insurance healing that's going on you is of course going to be transferred to them a little bit. So it's okay, but definitely a lot worse than our last year set, and I would argue one of the worst of all the healers right now. Okay, now stacking up Preservation against all the other healers. So the throughput feels very mid compared to all the other healers. I think it's safe to say right now, Holy Priest is bugged and doing more than it's intended, but I still think it's looking a lot better. Mistweaver's looking better. Rest of Shaman's looking better. I think Rest of Druid's not looking that far off of Preservation Evoker. Maybe they're kind of a bit more equal. And then Holy Paladin is looking kind of abysmal. And Disc Priest, I honestly don't know. Disc Priest is one of those things with like ramp timings and stuff like that that like it can look so bad in testing and end up being so good later on. I'm not going to try and speak on it. It's way too soon to say. But I think Preservation Evoker is somewhere in the middle of the pack. I definitely don't think in its state that it's going to be nearly as dominant as it was last year. I think the niche that it does fill that maybe not a lot of healers are able to fill right now is its kind of like ramp ability. It still has that powerful like burst healing when and where you need it. If they're sticking with this theme of heal absorbs, it does kind of like cut back on the need for like the instant topping power that was like kind of like a theme these past couple tiers, because like the damage being a heal absorb instead of being like a direct hit does give you more wiggle room on how long you do have to top people, so that could kind of take away from the need to have a strict ramp healer, and definitely opens up the door a lot more for these other healers that have usually struggled because they don't have that like insane like burst power. They just have a lot more constant throughput. So I don't think this is going to be a Preservation Evoker tier. I don't think it's going to be terrible. I think there is like some small sliver of a chance for them to slip in because they do still fit that niche for a super rampy bursty class. But based on the fights we've seen so far, I'm not sure that's going to be the case. That being said, I am most likely playing Preservation Evoker this tier just because we don't have a lot of DPS Evokers, and normally there's a bunch of mechanics where you need a bunch of Evoker utility, and so that's probably going to be me no matter what the strength of it is, unless it's so bad that I end up playing Og. I do think it's playable, I just don't think it's going to be nearly as insane as it was last tier. Okay, that's all I have to say for now. I might make another one of these videos depending on if they update Evoker or when I do Mythic testing, if I feel differently about this class. I might make another video, and of course I'll try and make a guide once we're getting closer to the raid actually releasing. Thank you so much for watching. Please comment below what you thought. Bye.